Could somebody please make it make sense?
Hey everybody, welcome to A Pop of Culture. I'm your host, the Esoteric and Facetious, and this is A Pop of Culture, which is my video essay podcast where I speak on pop culture, social justice, and the human experience from a Black, bisexual, millennial perspective. Everything, and I mean everything I say, should be taken with a grain of salt, as I'm simply a recent college grad with access to a recording device and the internet. With that being said, my shouldn't be your sole reason to critique my views unless it's truly relevant. If you disagree with anything I say, let's have a civil conversation in the comment section below. Before I get into the topic of this video, which is going to be stop using public figures and others in your social justice commentary, I want to advertise my cover channel, A Pop of Culture Sings, where I sing throwback R&B, contemporary R&B, pop music, whatever I'm feeling, whatever you're feeling. So if you want to be down like Brandy, if you're down with the click, RP Aaliyah, then definitely feel free to check that channel out. One thing before we get into this video, how do you like this setup? I love this setup. I feel like it's beautiful, but let me know what you think. I can shift it up if I need to. Now let's get into the topic of this video. The topic of this video is a big issue I see in social commentary on YouTube. The issue is the fact that people are always using celebrities or others in social justice conversations instead of holding themselves accountable and being vulnerable and honest. One of the things I'm sick and tired of when I see Twitter discourse is people using these figureheads for issues instead of actually talking about and being vulnerable about the ways that they themselves have experienced these things, these isms, and also perpetrated these isms and issues. And one of the biggest examples I've seen of situations like this are the Kiely Williams and 𝑭𝒐𝒍𝒍𝒐𝒘 incident and the DaBaby situation where he was saying homophobic things. If you're not aware, 𝘎𝙪𝙗𝙨𝙘𝙧𝙀, Kiely Williams, and 𝑭𝒐𝒍𝒍𝒐𝒘 were the founding members of 3LW, which was a girl group popular in the early 2000s. After the success of their first album, their first two singles, Play Is Gonna Play and No More Baby I'ma Do Right, the group got a lot of attention. They were touring with bigger acts and they seemed to be on the path to success. However, their management, their team, which included Kiely Williams' mother, felt they needed to push Adrian and Kiely more than 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri, and 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri states this is because they felt that Kiely and Adrian had more of a marketable image in comparison to 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri. This caused a lot of tension within the group as they started giving 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri less and less attention. And this all came to a head during a car ride where 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri and Kiely's mother got into a verbal altercation, and 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri ended up calling Kiely's mother the B word. In response to 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri calling her mother the B word, Kiely threw a bucket of chicken and the sides, whatever it was, on 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri. And after this, 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri left the vehicle. From what 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri and Kiely say, I believe they were riding somewhere and 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri had to ride back, so it was also kind of unsafe with the fact that they just let 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri leave. That was the end of 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri being in the group. Of course, 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri had a very successful career in acting. She's still acting. I love Queens. I love her as Jill in Queens, but that was the end of her time in 3LW. And one of the things I've noticed on social media is people always bring the situation up when they're discussing colorism. I don't have an issue people bringing up colorism in the industry, the colorism that 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri Naughton and other dark-skinned women have faced in the industry. But an issue I've had is so many people bring this issue up and they'll drag Kiely Williams for an incident that happened like 20 years ago. One of the issues I have with people always bringing this up is first and foremost because it's unclear whether Kiely Williams threw the chicken because 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri called her mother the B word or because of colorism. It appears to me from what 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri and Kiely have stated over the years that the colorism was more of an issue with the management not giving 𝘎𝑁𝑡ouri opportunities because they felt she, as a dark-skinned woman, wasn't what the look was. One of the issues I have with people always bringing this instance up when they're talking about colorism is people always want to point the finger at somebody else. They want to point the finger at Kiely Williams because Kiely Williams is a light-skinned public figure who you can assign blame to. Not saying that Kiely didn't deserve to be called out for that incident years ago when she was a teenager, but the issue I have is people are more willing to call out public figures than themselves. I do have an issue with people refusing to address the role that they've played in colorism as a child and even as an adult, because some of these people who will critique Kiely Williams will never openly admit that they used to say dark skin jokes, or they used to put lighter skinned people on a pedestal, or they used to put themselves on a pedestal as a lighter skinned person. And some of these people still do this. It's easy to bash Kiely Williams. I find it very funny that people in their 30s will not have open conversations about the harm that they've caused other people by their actions of colorism. But they'll call out somebody who's in their 30s for something that they did as a teenager and think that they're doing something when it comes to commentary. I have an issue with the way that people talk about Kiely Williams because I feel people want to point the finger at Kiely Williams for colorism for an incident that happened over 20 years ago that might not have even been related to colorism in regards to her, because they don't want to have actual conversations about how they have experienced colorism or perpetrated colorism. Because as long as we continue to point the finger at Kiely Williams for something that she did 20 years ago, we don't have to hold ourselves accountable for the ways that we've either perpetrated colorism, the pain we've experienced as a result of colorism, and we don't want to hold ourselves accountable for the times we've been quiet when people have said colorist remarks within our presence. Let's be real, let's go there. The reason why I feel people continually bring up names like Kiely Williams when it comes to conversations about colorism is because it's easy. Kiely Williams isn't somebody who's a big public figure right now. She had her heyday in the Cheetah Girls and 3LW, and for the most part, she's been out of the public eye for years, other than BET Presents the Encore. So it's very easy for us as people who are having these conversations about colorism and social issues to point the finger at Kiely, because what's she going to do about it? A lot of people feel extremely comfortable pointing the finger at a former child star for her action that might have not even been motivated by colorism 2 decades ago. These people will never go on their timeline and talk about how they have perpetrated colorism. To be very real with you, I feel people will continually bring up these public figures and these public incidents as a way of covering themselves. Because when you're always talking about somebody else, a public figure who you can point at, you're not being real and vulnerable about how you have contributed to these issues. Maybe instead of talking about Kiely Williams for the 500th time when it comes to colorism, let's talk about the ways that we have perpetrated colorism. When you say that, that's something that takes courage and vulnerability, because you don't know how people perceive that. You don't know if people will think less of you. I've noticed people do this thing where they'll only talk about social issues when it comes to other people and other people's actions. So that's why people continually bring up Kiely Williams and colorism, because they don't want to have to own up to the fact that they participated in colorism, or they allow people to say colorist things in their presence and didn't correct it. On social media, especially when it comes to the social commentary space, when it comes to discussing social justice issues, I think a lot of us want to come off unproblematic, which is fine. I feel a lot of people within social justice spaces and who participate in social commentary try our best to not be problematic. There's nothing wrong with trying not to be problematic. I think we all try our best. But the issue I have with people is sometimes in our attempt to not be problematic, we will not own up to our actions, which leads us to these very stale, repetitive conversations, because we're not actually talking about colorism in real life. We're talking about colorism as has been projected onto Kiely Williams through this incident and conversations about this incident. We've heard that conversation over and over and over again, but we're never going to stop hearing that conversation because people feel comfortable sharing that conversation in that narrative, more comfortable than they feel sharing their own issues and their own wrongdoings. But the problem is, as long as we hide our wrongdoings and try to act like they don't exist, we make these issues like colorism into something that only other people do, that we don't participate in. And as long as we keep these issues as something that only other people do, who are so wrong and evil, we never confront the issues that we have ourselves. In Twitter discourse, Kiely Williams is used as a stand-in for colorism. DaBaby is used as a stand-in for homophobia. And one thing I want to be very clear about is DaBaby was wrong with what he said. But the issue I have is people will only want to drag DaBaby. They'll not hold themselves accountable and say, a few years back, I used to not support gay marriage, but I've learned about how I was wrong and I've changed my mind. And I feel that's a much more valuable conversation to have with your followers than just dragging DaBaby, because we all know what DaBaby said was wrong. But hearing about how you, the common everyday person who's college educated, was homophobic, in my opinion, is way more interesting than hearing the rapper of the week say something homophobic. But you're not willing to say that because you don't want to look problematic. You don't want to look like you're one of the bad people. But here's the issue. We're all bad people. We're all one of the bad people in some sense. No matter how inclusive we are, no matter how good we try to be, we all have existing biases that we need to call out and unlearn. And as long as we just keep allowing these public figures to be stand-ins, J.K. Rowling is a stand-in for transphobia. Caitlyn Jenner and Blaire White are stand-ins for LGBT people. And I'm not saying that J.K. Rowling can't be held accountable. I'm not saying that Caitlyn Jenner and Blaire White can't be held accountable. I said Candace Owens is our stand-in for Black, anti-Black people. And I'm not saying Candace Owens can't be held accountable. All these people can be held accountable, but at the same time, when we have these social justice conversations, we need to make sure we're not only attacking the stand-ins, because discourse has been held on these stand-ins. We know why Caitlyn Jenner is problematic. We know why Blaire White's problematic. We know why Candace Owens is problematic. But do we know why regular everyday people say transphobic things or homophobic things? I feel a lot of the conversations we need to have to learn why people are homophobic or racist or transphobic we don't have, because we as people are embarrassed of the times we said things that were not politically correct. We don't want to be canceled for our past ignorant views that we've unlearned, but because we never talk about them and we have these stale-ass conversations about DaBaby and Kiely Williams and J.K. Rowling, we're never able to push these issues forward. One of the things I want to do on my platform is have real, honest, raw conversations. How have I been biased in the past? How have you been biased in the past? How have we unlearned these things? I think if we continue to only have conversations where we present ourselves as unproblematic angels who have been unproblematic angels since the moment we were born, we're never going to have the raw conversations we need to have that will help people unlearn their behavior. For example, if somebody who used to be homophobic, who's no longer homophobic, makes a video about how they learn to be accepting of LGBT identities, this helps people who are unpacking their homophobia and transphobia, who are on the fence, who are trying to unlearn homophobia and transphobia, who are starting to feel like maybe these beliefs that they have aren't good. This makes people who are trying to unlearn homophobia and transphobia feel less alone. If you're somebody who's trying to unlearn homophobia and transphobia, videos from people who are trying to act like they've never been problematic aren't going to help you that much. Because if you're trying to unlearn homophobia and transphobia, and you're being made to feel like having homophobic beliefs and transphobic beliefs makes you a bad person, you may feel like, well, I'm a bad person for having these beliefs rather than a misguided person. As long as we only use DaBaby as a stand-in for homophobia, we don't talk about the casual homophobia of Black, well-meaning Christians. As long as we use Kiely Williams as a stand-in for colorism, we don't talk about the Black men and women who perpetuate colorism to this day. As long as J.K. Rowling is used as a stand-in for transphobia, we don't talk about the countless people who are fighting against trans and non-binary rights within the U.S. and within the world. As long as we only use Caitlyn Jenner and Blaire White as stand-ins for anti-LGBT people, we don't talk about the countless transphobic, gay, lesbian, and bisexual people who actively try to harm trans and non-binary people and erase them from the LGBT community. We need to have real, honest conversations about how we have participated in systems that have oppressed other people. How have you been colorist? How have you been homophobic? How have you been transphobic? Whenever we have these conversations, we want to point at a public figure, or our auntie, or our cousin, or our friend. And even if we have done the work to unlearn things, we're still on that process. We're never truly done with the process of unlearning things, learning to do better, and learning to be an ally to other groups. One thing I find funny in commentary is some people who do commentary don't often insert themselves into commentary. So in discussions of pretty privilege, people talk about the issues, but they won't talk about how they fit into pretty privilege. In Black gay discourse, it's always about everyone else. Like, I've seen that within a lot of Black LGBT content creators. They'll talk about desirability politics, but they may not talk about how they benefit from desirability politics, or how they may engage with desirability politics. Some of the Black queer men I follow fit within beauty standards, and they'll not mention that in their videos about pretty privilege or desirability. And I feel like the conversation would be that much realer if they did. But when they have these conversations, they act like they're not a part of these systems. They act like they themselves don't fit into desirability or benefit or not benefit from these systems. And it stops the conversation from being that much realer. And on that note, I want to talk about 𝑭𝒊𝒓. I've mentioned 𝑭𝒊𝒓 on my channel a few times, but one of the things I loved about her content in 2021, especially her pretty privileged content, was the fact that she was being real. She spoke from the heart. She talked about her experiences that she lived through. And I want to do that on my channel when I talk about these issues and isms and things. If I talk about colorism, I want to talk about how I've benefited or not benefited from colorism. I want to talk about my personal experiences. I don't want to just talk about Kiely Williams, because that's not bringing the conversation forward. It's not moving anything forward. It's not saying anything that's not been said before. We need to stop trying to be comfortable, present ourselves as unproblematic angels, and get to the real nitty-gritty stuff. Thanks so much for watching. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are conversations you've avoided having, or conversations where you've tried to point the finger at a public figure rather than addressing your own issues? I'm trying to challenge myself to insert myself into my commentary and not just make my commentary about public figures and their wrongdoings, because I'm not beyond reproach. If I'm talking about colorism, I want to talk about how I've experienced colorism or perpetrated it and things of that sort. I don't want to just have a baseline conversation about colorism and point the finger at a public figure I've never met. I'm not saying you can't hold public figures accountable, but hold yourself accountable too. Because truth be told, you as a regular everyday person having run-ins with these issues, in my opinion, is more interesting than celebrities saying bigoted things. I want us all to insert ourselves in the conversation and stop having these theoretical conversations about desirability, about colorism, about fat phobia, about ableism. How have you contributed? How have I contributed? Those are the conversations we need to have, because those are the real, authentic conversations. Anyone can look up the Webster Dictionary definition of ableism, homophobia, transphobia. We're so removed from the realities of these celebrities and public figures, but having conversations about how we interact with these things is so much more meaningful. Use your experience and your former problematic behaviors and beliefs to empower other people to become better. Don't hide them away. Don't be ashamed of them, because there's nothing wrong with learning to be better and to do better. That's what we're all trying to do. Remember that. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day. Love y'all. Bye-bye.
Like this video if you like this video. If you made it to this point in the video, comment a thumbs up emoji below, or still here if you are still here. Subscribe if you want to see more, and make sure to hit that bell so you're the first to know when I upload new content. I upload new content every week. And if you're enjoying yourself, and why wouldn't you be enjoying yourself? To the left, there's a playlist of all my video essay podcasts. I have 24 and counting. In the center is a button to subscribe if you just haven't had a chance to subscribe and you would like to. And to the right is a playlist of all of my covers and parodies. So if you are wanting to check those out, feel free to do so. And if you want to support me, if you want to support the show, first and foremost, a non-financial way you can support is just through sharing this video. I can make the thumbnails, I can, make the titles, I can do the tags and do keyword research. But one of the best ways that I can grow my brand is through y'all sharing this content with other people who like this type of content, because I nor you can control the algorithm, but I can control the quality of the content I make, and y'all can, if you enjoy the content, share with people who can like it, so that way, if y'all are feeling it, it's getting put out there, whether, the algorithm favors it or not. Somebody's gonna see it because you resonated with it and you resonated with me, and now you're sharing it with other people. So if